Hello, welcome back to my channel. Tonight we're diving into some pretty dark territory with Stranger Things Season 5. I'll be covering all the tragic predictions I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more theories to explore. So we'll start with a recap of where Season 4 left us, then move on to character fate predictions, endgame scenarios for Hawkins itself, and some theories about how this whole mess might conclude. There's plenty to get talking about. But if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. But for now, grab your Eggo waffles and flashlight, get cozy in the upside down, and let's begin. So when we left off at the end of Season 4, Hawkins was literally split open. I mean, we're not talking about some minor supernatural incident anymore. We're talking about massive rifts tearing through the town, the upside down bleeding into our reality, and pretty much everyone we love traumatized beyond belief. The finale gave us this absolutely devastating 2-day time jump, where we see the aftermath of Vecna's plan actually working, despite our hero's best efforts to stop him. And honestly, the situation is so much worse than most people realize. Let's break down exactly what happened. Vecna, or Henry Creel, or One, whatever you want to call him, needed 4 kills to open 4 gates that would converge and tear Hawkins apart. He got 3 victims early in the season, and then he went after Max. Now, Max technically died. Her heart stopped. Vecna got what he needed, but 11, using every ounce of power she had left, managed to restart Max's heart and pull her back. Sort of. Because here's the really horrifying thing. Max is alive, but she's in a coma. And not just any coma. Vecna still has her. He took her consciousness, her memories, her sense of self. Lucas is sitting by her bedside, looking at a body that's breathing but empty. 11 even says it directly. I can't find her. She's not there. That's the worst kind of tragic, honestly. It's not a clean death. It's this horrible limbo where she's technically alive but gone, and everyone has to sit with that uncertainty. Is she in there somewhere? Can she be saved? Or is her body just running on autopilot while Vecna keeps her consciousness trapped in the upside down? We don't know, and that's what makes it so brutal. But Max's situation was just one part of Vecna's victory. The 4 gates he created, those massive rifts cutting through Hawkins, they met in the middle and essentially split the town into sections. And once they connected, the upside down started properly invading our reality. We see it in the final shots of Season 4. These red particles, like ash or spores, floating down from the sky, dead vines and tendrils crawling up buildings, the sky looking wrong, tinted with this sickly red glow. Hawkins is actively being consumed, and it's only been 2 days. The gang is scattered too, which doesn't help. 11, Will, Jonathan, and the California crew just got back to Hawkins. Hopper and Joyce returned from Russia, having barely survived that whole nightmare. The Hawkins kids, Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Erica, they're traumatized from everything with the basketball team and Jason Carver's mob. Nancy, Steve, and Robin are dealing with the fact that they were in the upside down, saw Vecna's full plan, and still couldn't stop it. And Eddie Munson is dead, which Dustin is absolutely destroyed by. So you've got this fractured group of people who've been through separate hells, all trying to come together to face an enemy who just won. Because that's the thing, Vecna won. His plan worked. The gates are open, Hawkins is being invaded, and he's got Max's consciousness as a trophy or weapon or whatever he's planning to use it for. Our heroes stopped him from killing her completely. Sure, but they didn't actually stop his plan. What's really scary is how much ground the Upside Down is gaining. In Season 1, the Upside Down was this parallel dimension that you could access through small gates. In Season 2, the Mind Flayer was trying to invade through Will and the Tunnel system. In Season 3, they closed the gate and seemingly cut off the connection. But Season 4 revealed that Vecna's been orchestrating everything from the start, building up to this moment where he could open permanent gates that can't be closed the same way the previous ones were. These aren't gates powered by a machine in a Russian base. These are literally ripped into reality by Vecna's power and fueled by deaths and trauma. And here's something I've always wondered about. The gates aren't just doorways, they're wounds in reality itself. When they converged in the middle of Hawkins, they created this nexus point, this central location where the barriers between dimensions are basically gone. The Upside Down isn't trying to invade anymore. It's merging with our world. It's becoming the same space. The 2-day time jump shows us that people are trying to deal with this as a natural disaster. The military's rolled into Hawkins, setting up relief stations and emergency housing. Families are evacuating. The news is covering it. But of course, they don't understand what's actually happening. They think it's an earthquake, seismic activity, structural damage from geological shifts. No one outside of our core group and a handful of government people know that Hawkins is being invaded by an alternate dimension controlled by a psychic serial killer from the 1950s, which would sound mental if you said it out loud. The really interesting thing is that despite everything that happened, despite all the losses and trauma, the characters don't actually know the full extent of what's coming. They know Vecna is powerful. They know he's connected to the Mind Flayer and the Upside Down. They know he's been pulling strings since the beginning. But they don't fully understand his endgame yet. Why does he want to merge the dimensions? What happens after Hawkins is consumed? Does he stop there? Or is Hawkins just the starting point for spreading the Upside Down across the entire world? And they definitely don't know how to stop him. In Season 4, they threw everything at Vecna. 11 fought him psychically, while Nancy, Steve and Robin literally set him on fire and shot him repeatedly. And he still got back up and completed his plan. So if massive psychic battles and Molotov cocktails don't work, what does? That's the terrifying question going into Season 5. How do you kill something that powerful? And more importantly, what will it cost to try? Before looking into all this, I honestly thought the Season 4 ending was devastating but left some hope. But the more you analyse it, the more you realise how thoroughly Vecna won. Max is gone. Eddie is dead. Hawkins is actively being consumed. The Upside Down is spreading. And our heroes are exhausted, separated and out of ideas. That's not exactly a great starting point for the final season. But talking a bit about the Upside Down itself and how it's evolved, because that's where things get properly terrifying. Let's talk about the Upside Down itself, because it's not the same place we saw back in Season 1, not even close. In the first season, the Upside Down was this dark, decaying mirror of our world. Everything looked the same but rotted and abandoned, covered in this weird biological growth and floating particles. It was creepy and dangerous, but it still felt like a place with rules. You could navigate it if you knew your way around Hawkins. You could hide from the Demogorgon. It was hostile, but not actively malevolent. But Season 4 changed everything we thought we knew. First, there's the whole frozen in time aspect that honestly blew my mind when they revealed it. The Upside Down isn't a real-time mirror of Hawkins. It's stuck. Specifically, it's frozen on November 6th, 1983, the day Will Byers vanished. Nancy figures this out in Season 4 when she goes into the Upside Down version of her house and finds her old diary ending abruptly on that date. Her newer diary entries, the ones from after Will disappeared, they're not there because the Upside Down stopped updating that day. What's really fascinating about this is what it implies. The Upside Down isn't just a parallel dimension that's always existed alongside ours. It's something that got locked into place when 11 first opened the gate. That original gate she accidentally created in Hawkins' lab when she encountered the Demogorgon. That wasn't just a doorway. It fundamentally changed the Upside Down's relationship with our reality. Before that moment, the Upside Down might have been its own separate timeline, its own flowing reality. But when 11 tore that first hole, she froze it, created this snapshot of Hawkins that would remain unchanged, or at least that's one theory. Another possibility is that Vecna deliberately stopped the Upside Down from updating after that date. He was already connected to 11 psychically through the original gate. Maybe he wanted to preserve Hawkins exactly as it was at the moment when everything started, like keeping a trophy or a memory. We see in Season 4 that Vecna is obsessed with memories and preserving moments. He traps his victims in their worst memories. He built an entire layer of the Upside Down to look like his childhood home. So having the entire dimension frozen on the day his plan truly began makes a twisted kind of sense. But regardless of why it's frozen, the implications are mental. It means the Upside Down isn't keeping up with changes in the real world. Buildings that were constructed after 1983 don't exist there. People who moved to Hawkins after Will disappeared wouldn't have houses in the Upside Down, which actually plays into how our characters can navigate it. They can use their knowledge of old Hawkins to move around, but anything new is uncharted territory. Now, the gates themselves work differently than they used to. The original gate in Season 1 was this sort of organic wound that the Demogorgon could pass through. The gate in Season 2 at the lab was bigger and more stable. The gate in Season 3 was artificially created using the Russian machine. But the gates Vecna created in Season 4 are something else entirely. They're not powered by machines, they're powered by death, specifically by the psychic energy released when Vecna kills his victims. Each time Vecna takes someone, he doesn't just kill their body, he consumes their consciousness, takes their memories and essence, and uses that energy to tear a hole in reality. That's why he needed 4 victims. 4 deaths, 4 gates, all meeting at a central point to rip Hawkins open properly. And because these gates are powered by Vecna himself, rather than some external machine, you can't just shut them down. There's no plug to pull. They'll stay open as long as Vecna wants them open. And here's where it gets really scary. The Upside Down isn't just sitting on the other side of those gates anymore. It's actively spreading through them. Those red particles we see falling in the Season 4 finale, that's the Upside Down's atmosphere leaking into our world. The vines and tendrils crawling up buildings, that's the biological matter of the Upside Down, physically growing into Hawkins. It's not an invasion in the traditional sense. It's more like an infection. The 2 dimensions are merging, blending together, and eventually there might not be a distinction anymore. What's really interesting is the role of the Mind Flayer in all this. For seasons, we thought the Mind Flayer was the big bad, this ancient evil entity from the Upside Down that wanted to consume our world. But Season 4 revealed that Vecna created the Mind Flayer, or at least he shaped it. When he first got banished to the Upside Down by 11 back in 1979, he found this sort of cloud of particles, this hive mind dust, and he literally formed it into the spider-like entity we know as the Mind Flayer. So the question is, who's really in control? Vecna shaped the Mind Flayer, but does that mean he controls it completely? Or is the Mind Flayer its own entity that's just been using Vecna's form and intelligence to enact its own plans? There's this creepy line in Season 2 where Will, who's connected to the Mind Flayer, says it's ancient, that it's been around for thousands, maybe millions of years, but Vecna only created its current form in 1979. So what was the Mind Flayer before Vecna found it? Was it just mindless particles, or was it something else? I'm not going to lie, the Mind Flayer's true nature is one of the biggest unanswered questions going into Season 5, because if Vecna is just a puppet for something older and more powerful, that changes everything. Our heroes might kill Vecna only to discover that the real threat is the entity he served. Or maybe they're completely merged now, 2 consciousnesses sharing the same goal of remaking reality into their image. The biological nature of the Upside Down is something that doesn't get discussed enough. It's not just a dark mirror of our world, it's alive. Everything in the Upside Down seems to be part of one massive organism. The vines all connect, the particles all move together like a swarm. The creatures, the demogorgons and demodogs and bats, they all seem to be extensions of the same hive mind. And now that the Upside Down is bleeding into Hawkins, that hive mind is spreading too. Those vines aren't just creepy decorations. They're literally the nervous system of a dimension-sized organism that's taking root in our reality. Imagine being a normal Hawkins resident right now. You're being told to evacuate because of earthquake damage, but you can see these weird vines growing up the side of your house. You can feel the air getting colder, harder to breathe. The sky looks wrong. Your pets are acting scared, and nobody in authority is explaining what's actually happening because they don't know. You're just supposed to pack up and leave your entire life behind because the ground decided to crack open. That's terrifying even without knowing about the actual upside-down invasion. And this is where our predictions get really dark, because if the upside down is actively merging with Hawkins, that means our characters aren't just fighting monsters anymore. They're fighting the environment itself, reality itself. And that's a battle you can't really win without massive sacrifice. You can't exactly punch a dimension. You can't shoot the concept of parallel realities merging. The only way to stop it is probably to cut it off at the source, which means getting to Vecna and either killing him or severing his connection to the Upside Down somehow. And we already know from Season 4 that killing Vecna is basically impossible with conventional means. Now let's talk about the characters themselves and what tragic fates might be waiting for them. This is the hardest part to discuss, honestly. Now, even though we want everyone to survive and get their happy ending, Stranger Things has never been shy about trauma, loss, and sacrifice. Bob died saving everyone in Season 2. Billy died closing the gate in Season 3. Eddie died giving Dustin and the others time to escape in Season 4. And those were just supporting characters. The Duffer Brothers have basically promised that Season 5 is going to be devastating, the most emotionally intense season yet. So let's break down what might happen to each of our beloved characters, starting with the most obvious target. 11, or Jane Hopper, if we're being proper about it, has been the main character since day one. She's the most powerful person in the show, the only one who can actually fight Vecna on his level. And that's exactly why her survival odds are so low. There's this problem in storytelling called the Superman problem. When you have a character who's too powerful, the only way to create real stakes is to remove them from the equation somehow. Either they lose their powers, or they sacrifice themselves, or they die. We've already seen Eleven's powers get depleted multiple times. Every major battle leaves her with worse nosebleeds, longer recovery times, more strain on her body. In Season 4, when she fought Vecna to save Max, she was pushing herself so hard that her eyes were bloodshot and she was screaming in pain. And she still couldn't fully win. She saved Max's body, but couldn't stop Vecna's plan or retrieve Max's consciousness. So if she was already at her limit then, what happens when she has to fight even harder in Season 5? The really tragic thing is that Eleven's whole arc has been about learning to be a normal person. She wants friends and family and a regular life. She wants to go to school and have a boyfriend and just be Jane. But the universe keeps forcing her back into the role of weapon. She can't escape it, and I think the series will end with her making the ultimate sacrifice. She'll burn out her powers completely, maybe even her life, to close the gates and stop Vecna permanently. It's the only ending that makes narrative sense for her character, even though it's devastating to think about. There's also the connection between her and Vecna. They're not siblings, but they're connected. They both came from the Hawkins lab experiments. They both have psychic powers. Vecna even calls her his equal in Season 4, so there might be some kind of cosmic balance thing happening, where the only way to destroy Vecna is for 11 to destroy herself too. Like, they're two sides of the same coin, and you can't eliminate one without eliminating the other. And then there's the Hopper angle. Hopper just got her back after everyone thought he was dead. They've barely had any time to actually be father and daughter. So of course that relationship is going to be ripped apart by the end. Either Hopper dies trying to protect her, or she dies and he has to live with losing another daughter. There's no way both of them survive and get a happy ending. The show doesn't work that way. I think Eleven's death, if it happens, will be the emotional climax of the series. The moment where everyone is sobbing. The red wedding of Stranger Things, basically. And it'll probably be somewhat hopeful in that she'll succeed in her goal. She'll stop Vecna, close the gates, save Hawkins. But she won't survive it. And everyone will have to live in the world she saved without her in it. Max Mayfield is already basically dead, which is maybe worse than actually being dead. She's in a coma, her consciousness trapped somewhere by Vecna, and everyone's just hoping she'll wake up. But the chances of that happening in a happy, normal way are pretty much zero. There are basically 3 scenarios for Max. 1, she's actually gone. Her consciousness was destroyed when Vecna took it, and her body is just an empty shell being kept alive by machines. This is the darkest option, but honestly pretty likely. It would explain why 11 can't find her. There's nothing to find. Vecna consumed her essence completely. 2, her consciousness is trapped in the Upside Down somehow. Maybe she's locked in one of Vecna's memory prisons, or maybe she's just scattered across that dimension. Her sense of self fragmented and lost. In this scenario, there's a possibility of saving her, but it would require someone going into the Upside Down, finding her consciousness somehow, and bringing it back. And even then, after everything she's been through, the trauma of being trapped and alone in that hellscape, would she even want to come back? Would she still be Max? Or would she be too broken to function? 3, and this is the most horrifying option. Vecna is using her body as a vessel. She's not in control, but she's not dead either. He's puppeting her, using her as a spy or a weapon, or just as a way to hurt her friends. Imagine Lucas or 11 having to watch Max walk around, talk, maybe even attack them, knowing that it's not really her, that Vecna is wearing her like a suit. And then imagine them having to make the choice to destroy her body to stop him, knowing that doing so means killing whatever tiny chance remained that the real Max was still in there somewhere. What's really heartbreaking is Lucas watching all of this. He's sitting by her bedside, reading her letters, talking to her, hoping she can hear him. And whether she wakes up corrupted or stays in the coma or dies completely, his ending is tragic no matter what. He's going to lose her one way or another. Best case scenario, she wakes up, but she's traumatized and different, and they can't go back to what they had. Worst case, she never wakes up, and he has to watch the machines keeping her alive eventually get turned off. I'm not going to lie, Max's storyline is the one that makes me most uncomfortable. There's something so cruel about the alive but not really situation. It's harder to process than a clean death. At least with death, you can mourn and eventually move forward. But this is just endless uncertainty and false hope. And Sadie Sink is such a brilliant actress that whatever they do with Max is going to be properly devastating to watch. Whether she's playing Max as a puppet or doing flashback scenes of Max's consciousness trapped in memories, or just lying in that hospital bed while other characters react, she'll sell the tragedy completely. Will Byers was the reason everything started, the original victim, the first person to be taken by the Upside Down, and there's been this running theme that he's never fully escaped it. He still has that connection, that sense of the mind flayer. He can feel when it's close. He's described as being like a spy for the Upside Down, this permanent link that was forged when he was possessed in Season 2. Now there's also the personal stuff with Will that's been building. His feelings for Mike, his sense of being different and isolated, his struggle with identity and belonging. The show hasn't explicitly confirmed he's gay yet, but it's been heavily implied, especially in Season 4, with the painting and the conversation in the van. And that adds this extra layer of tragedy to any prediction about his fate. The really dark theory is that Will's connection to the Upside Down makes him a liability. Maybe Vecna can use that link to possess him again, but worse this time. Permanent. Maybe the only way to close the gates is to sever that connection, which means killing Will because he's too integrated with the Upside Down to separate them. He was the first victim, and he might have to be the final sacrifice. There's this whole thing that people forget about from Season 2, where Joyce and Jonathan discuss whether they should let Will die to stop the mind flare. They don't go through with it, obviously. They find another way, but that conversation plants the seed for this exact scenario. What if in season 5, they're faced with the same choice again, but this time there is no other way? What if Will himself tells them they have to do it, that he's the key to stopping everything? Imagine Will finally getting to confess his feelings to Mike, finally being honest about who he is and what he's been hiding, and then immediately having to sacrifice himself. That's peak tragic storytelling. The character who's been suffering in silence the entire series, who's never caught a break, finally having a moment of truth and connection before being ripped away. It's brutal, and there's the LGBTQ plus representation angle that makes this complicated. Killing off your gay character right after confirming his sexuality is a really problematic trope in media. It's called bury your gays, and it's something shows get criticised for constantly. So the Duffer Brothers might avoid that particular ending because of the backlash it would cause, but then again, Stranger Things has never been afraid of dark choices, and Will's narrative has always been about suffering. His ending being tragic might just be inevitable, regardless of the representation concerns. To be honest, I really hope I'm wrong about Will. He deserves better than another round of trauma and death. But narratively, his connection to the Upside Down and his position as the original victim makes him a prime candidate for sacrifice. The show started with saving Will. It might end with losing him. Steve Harrington has had one of the best character arcs in the entire show, from douchebag boyfriend to beloved babysitter to genuinely heroic figure. He's evolved into pretty much everyone's favourite character, which is exactly why he's probably going to die. There's this storytelling rule where the character who's completed their arc is the one most likely to be killed off. Steve's arc is about finding family and purpose outside of his shallow high school popularity. He's become a protector, a big brother figure, someone who will throw himself into danger to keep others safe. That arc is complete. He's found his role. He's at peace with who he is, and that makes him narratively expendable. The babysitter dies protecting the kids. It's a classic trope, and Steve fits it perfectly. He's already taken so many hits for the group. The bat bites in season 4, getting dragged underwater, getting strangled by the vines. He keeps putting himself in harm's way, and eventually, that luck runs out. I think Steve's death will be him making a last stand, buying time for the others to escape or complete the mission. He'll go out like a hero, which is what he's always wanted to be, but it'll absolutely wreck everyone who loves him. And let's be honest, the show loves Steve, but Joe Keery has a movie career now. He's doing other projects. Having his character die in the finale gives him a clean exit and a meaningful ending, rather than just writing him out awkwardly. It makes sense from a practical standpoint too. There's also the Nancy, Steve, Jonathan love triangle that's been dragging on since season 1. One way to resolve that triangle is to kill one of the guys. If Steve dies, Nancy and Jonathan can end up together without Steve being left alone and heartbroken. It's tragic but clean. No messy breakups or awkward friendship dynamics, just loss and moving forward. The really sad part is that Steve's whole arc in season 4 was about his future. He talks about the RV and the 6 kids he wants to have. He's making plans, building a dream. And in fiction, when a character starts planning their future out loud, that's usually a death flag. They're never going to get that future. They're being set up for tragedy. I think Steve's death will happen during the final battle, probably while protecting Dustin or one of the other kids. He'll have some heroic moment, maybe a badass line or action, and then he'll be gone. Quick, heroic, or meaningful. And Dustin will be absolutely destroyed because he's already lost Eddie, and now he's losing the other big brother figure in his life. Peak tragic hero arc. Aki, Mike Wheeler is an interesting case because he's been positioned as the heart of the group since season 1. He's the leader, the one who holds everyone together, the one who gives the inspiring speeches. But he's also the one with the least actual powers or combat abilities. He can't fight Vecna psychically like 11. He can't sense the upside down like Will. He's just a kid with determination and love for his friends. There's this speech Mike gives to 11 in season 4 when she's fighting Vecna. He tells her that he loves her, that he's loved her since the day they met, that she's his superhero. It's this beautiful moment that gives 11 the strength to keep fighting. But it also feels like a goodbye, like he's giving her everything she needs to hear before he's gone. The leader dies for the team. That's a pretty common trope in ensemble stories. The person who brought everyone together makes the ultimate sacrifice to save them all. Mike's role has always been about bringing people together and inspiring them. His death would shatter the group, but also unite them in grief and purpose. It's dark, but it fits. What's interesting about Mike is that Finn Wolfhard, like Joe Keery, has a growing career outside the show. He's doing movies and music and other projects, so having Mike die in the finale would give Finn a graceful exit while keeping the character's memory alive in a meaningful way. The really heartbreaking scenario is Mike sacrificing himself to save 11. He's been protecting her since day one. He's always put himself between her and danger. So him making the ultimate choice, maybe dying so she can live, or giving his life to power some final attack on Vecna, that would be completely in character. And it would destroy 11, who spent the entire series learning that she deserves love and connection, only to have that ripped away. I think if Mike dies, it'll be unexpected. Not in a final battle necessarily, but maybe earlier in the season, during a mission that seems routine. Something that catches everyone off guard and reminds them that no one is safe. That would be more shocking than a planned sacrifice, and shock value is something Stranger Things loves. Dustin Henderson is the heart and comedic relief of the show, which historically means he's either completely safe or dead by the end. There's no middle ground for characters like Dustin. They're either the survivor who carries the story forward, or they're the tragic loss that shows no one was protected by genre conventions. After Eddie's death in season 4, Dustin's been carrying that trauma. He had to tell Eddie's uncle what happened, had to process losing his friend, had to deal with the fact that Eddie died while protecting him, so there's already this survivor's guilt built into his character. If Dustin dies in season 5, it could be framed as him joining Eddie, completing whatever he felt he owed his friend. A double tragedy where the death debt comes due. What's tragic about Dustin is that he's the smart one. His technical knowledge, his scientific understanding, his ability to build and fix things, all of that makes him incredibly valuable to the team. But it also means he'll probably be involved in whatever final plan they come up with to stop Vecna. And being involved in the plan means being in danger. Maybe he's the one setting up the equipment, configuring the whatever it is that will close the gates or weaken Vecna. And maybe something goes wrong, or he has to stay behind to finish the job manually, and he doesn't make it out. The other angle is the Steve and Dustin dynamic. They're best friends, basically family at this point. If Steve dies, Dustin loses another big brother. If Dustin dies, Steve loses the little brother he's been protecting. Either way, one of them is going to be devastated by the other's death, and that relationship has been so central to the show's emotional core that it feels inevitable one of them won't survive. I think Dustin's death, if it happens, will be quieter than the others. Not a big dramatic sacrifice, but something that happens almost accidentally. A piece of debris, or a monster that got through, or equipment failing at the wrong moment. And that would make it worse, honestly. The unfairness of it, the randomness, the fact that someone so smart and careful and loved could just be gone because of bad timing. To be honest, I hope Dustin survives. He's the character who could carry the story forward in the aftermath, the one who would document everything and make sure people remembered what happened. But that might be exactly why he doesn't survive. Letting him live to tell the story would be too kind for a show that's promised to devastate us. Lucas Sinclair's fate is pretty much tied to Max's. If she dies or stays in the coma, his story becomes about loss and learning to move forward. If she wakes up but is changed or possessed, his story becomes about impossible choices. Either way, tragedy. Lucas has spent the past 2 seasons dealing with identity and belonging. The basketball team storyline in season 4 was all about him trying to fit in with popular kids while staying loyal to his real friends. And he chose his real friends in the end, but that choice cost him. He lost his social standing, got targeted by Jason's mob, and had to watch Max die and then not really die in his arms. The really dark possibility is that Lucas dies protecting Max, or trying to save her. Maybe there's a moment where Vecna uses Max's body to attack the group, and Lucas is the only one who can get close enough to stop her without hurting her. And maybe he succeeds, but it costs him his life. That would be peak tragedy. The boyfriend dying to save the girlfriend, who's not even really there anymore. Or maybe Lucas survives but loses everything. Max stays in the coma or dies completely. His sister Erica sees something traumatic. His parents finally learn the truth about everything, and it destroys their family. He ends the series alive but hollow, a ghost of who he was. Sometimes survival is the more tragic ending. What's interesting about Lucas is that Caleb McLaughlin has talked in interviews about wanting more depth for his character, more serious storylines. So season 5 giving Lucas a truly tragic arc would be fulfilling that request, but in the worst possible way. Be careful what you wish for, basically. Joyce Byers has lost so much already. Her relationship fell apart. Her youngest son was kidnapped and possessed. She's been living in poverty and stress for years. She watched Bob die trying to save them. And just when she finally got Hopper back, just when she had something good and stable, the world ends again. The thing about Joyce is that she's the mom character, and in horror and sci-fi, mums have plot armor. They usually survive because their role is to protect the children and keep the family together. But stranger things might subvert that. What if Joyce dies protecting Will or Eleven or Jonathan? What if she makes the ultimate maternal sacrifice? The other possibility is that Hopper dies and Joyce has to live without him. They just reunited after a year of thinking he was dead. They've barely had time to be together, so of course the show might rip that away. Hopper dying on the final mission, Joyce having to continue without him, that would be absolutely brutal. She'd be the survivor, the one who has to rebuild and keep going despite losing everything. I think Joyce survives, actually, but survival might be worse than death in her case. She might lose both of her sons or Hopper, or her entire life in Hawkins. She'd be the one left standing in the ruins, the witness to all the tragedy. And that's its own kind of horror. There's something really heartbreaking about Joyce's storyline being about never catching a break. She's a good person who's tried so hard to keep her family safe, and the universe just keeps punishing her for it. If the series ends with her alone, having lost everything despite her best efforts, that's maybe the darkest ending of all. Jim Hopper already died once as a fake-out in season 3. The explosion in the Russian base, everyone mourning him, the letter to 11. And then season 4 revealed he survived and had been in a Russian prison camp for months, so he's already used up his fake death. If he dies in season 5, it's permanent. The thing is, Hopper's whole arc is about redemption and becoming a real father to 11. He lost his biological daughter Sarah to cancer, spent years as a broken alcoholic, and then found a new purpose in protecting Elle. So his story has always been about second chances and learning to live with loss. The question is whether his story ends with him succeeding in his role as father figure and dying to protect Elle, or whether he survives and has to live with losing Elle as his final tragedy. David Harbour has said in interviews that he wants Hopper's ending to be meaningful and earned, which could go either way. Meaningful could be a heroic sacrifice, or it could be surviving and having to carry the weight of everything that happened. Either option is devastating. I think Hopper dies in the final battle. He's too much of an action hero, too much of a protector to sit on the sidelines. He'll be right there in the thick of it, probably leading the military side of things or the adult group, while the kids handle the supernatural side. And at some point, he'll see a choice: save himself or save 11. And he'll choose 11 every time. That's who he is, the father willing to die for his child. The really tragic element is the letter from season 3. If Hopper dies in season 5, that letter becomes his goodbye to 11. Everything he wrote about fear and love and keeping her safe, all of that is what she'll have left of him. And that's properly heartbreaking. Nancy Wheeler is interesting because she's positioned as the badass survivor, the one with the guns and the plan and the determination. But in horror movies and shows, the investigator is often the one who doesn't make it. They get too close to the truth. They're too determined to stop the monster, and it costs them. Nancy's season 4 storyline included Vecna giving her a vision of her family dead. Her mum, her dad, her little sister Holly, Mike, all of them killed. Vecna told her this was the future, what would happen if she didn't stop him. And visions in Stranger Things have a way of coming true, at least partially. So maybe Nancy's vision was foreshadowing. Maybe she loses her family, or maybe she dies trying to prevent that future. There's also the love triangle with Steve and Jonathan. If Nancy dies, that triangle gets resolved in the darkest way possible. Neither guy gets the girl, because the girl is gone. It's tragic but clean. No messy relationship drama needed. What's really dark about Nancy's arc is that she's the one who shot Vecna repeatedly in season 4. She looked him in the eye and pulled the trigger multiple times. She hurt him, even if it wasn't permanent. So Vecna has personal reasons to target her specifically in season 5. He might want revenge, and Nancy being killed by the monster she tried to stop would fit the horror genre perfectly. I think Nancy survives, but loses people. Maybe Mike dies, and she has to live with that. Maybe Jonathan dies, and she has to deal with the guilt of never having resolved their relationship issues. Maybe her family dies, and she's the last Wheeler standing. Survival with massive loss seems like the most fitting ending for her character. Jonathan Byers is honestly the hardest to predict. He's been more of a supporting character in recent seasons, especially with the California plot keeping him separated from the main action. But being separated might actually be protective, or it might mean his death would be more shocking because he wasn't in the obvious danger zone. Jonathan's whole role has been protective older brother. He's been looking out for Will since day one, taking photos, investigating, fighting monsters. So if Will dies, Jonathan's entire purpose collapses. What does he do with himself if the brother he's dedicated his life to protecting is gone? That's its own tragedy. The other angle is the photography thing. Jonathan documents everything through his camera. He preserves memories and moments. And in fiction, the documentarian often dies before the story ends, leaving their work behind as a record. Jonathan's photos could become the only proof of what really happened in Hawkins, the evidence left behind after he's gone. Honestly, Jonathan's the wild card. He could die early and shock everyone. He could survive and be part of the final battle. He could end up being the one to make an unexpected, heroic choice. But whatever happens, I think his ending will involve Will somehow. Their relationship is too central to Jonathan's character for it to be ignored in his final moments. The truly devastating thing is that it's not just one or two characters who are in danger. Based on the Duffer Brothers' comments and the sheer scale of the threat, we're probably looking at multiple major character deaths. And that's before we even get into the supporting characters. Now, the supporting cast of Stranger Things has always been pretty vulnerable. We've already lost Bob, Barb, Billy, Eddie, and loads of others. So let's talk about who's next on the chopping block. Murray Bauman is the conspiracy theorist who's somehow become a key player in the fight against the Upside Down. He's also comedy relief, which historically means he's either going to survive through sheer luck or die horribly to show things are serious. I'm not going to lie, Murray's probably done for. He's too good at sneaking around and getting information, which means he'll probably get caught doing exactly that in season 5. Maybe he's infiltrating some Russian operation or government facility, gets discovered, and doesn't make it out. Or maybe he sacrifices himself to buy the others time, going out with some sarcastic comments because that's who he is. Erica Sinclair has been the breakout character since season 3. She's smart, funny, fearless, and way too young to be involved in any of this, which is exactly why her potential death would be so shocking. Stranger Things hasn't killed a kid character yet, not properly. Max is in limbo, but she's not dead. If they kill Erica, an actual child, that would be crossing a line the show hasn't crossed. It would show that no one is safe, that the stakes are real. But it would also be incredibly dark, maybe too dark. Lucas having to deal with losing his little sister, on top of everything with Max. That's brutal even for this show. I think Erica survives, but she's going to see something traumatic. Her innocence is definitely gone. Argyle is the stoner from California who somehow became essential to the plot by having a pizza van and knowing how to make pineapple pizza for Eleven's sensory deprivation setup. He's pure comedy relief, and comedy relief characters have a tendency to die when things get serious. The funny guy getting killed shows the audience that the tone has shifted, that the horror is real. Argyle dying would be shocking because he's so disconnected from the actual upside-down business. He's just a dude who got dragged into this mess by his friends. His death would be random and unfair, and that's what would make it effective. Dmitri, Enzo, and Yuri from the Russian plotline have already survived way longer than expected. Enzo helped Hopper escape and betrayed his own country's operations. Yuri was willing to sell Hopper back to the Russians until Joyce and Murray convinced him otherwise with threats and bribes. These are not good guys with plot armor. They're morally grey characters who could be killed off without much controversy. I think at least one of them dies in season 5, probably during whatever Russian-related subplot comes up. Maybe they come to Hawkins to help with the final fight and don't make it through. That would be a fitting end for characters who've been trying to survive in impossible situations. Dr. Owens has been the good government guy since season 2, the one who actually cares about the kids and wants to help, rather than just cover things up. But government figures in sci-fi shows don't usually survive. They're there to represent authority and then die to show that authority can't save you. Owens might sacrifice himself helping 11, or the others escape some government trap. He'd go out protecting the kids he's tried to help, which would be sad but appropriate for his character. Karen Wheeler, Mike and Nancy's mum, has been on the sidelines for most of the show. She knows something is wrong, but doesn't know the full truth. But season 5 is set in Hawkins, with the gates open and the Upside Down invading. There's no way to keep the parents in the dark anymore. Karen might finally learn what her kids have been dealing with, and she might die trying to help them or protect Holly. The mother figure sacrificing herself for her children is a classic trope, and it would devastate Mike and Nancy. And then there are all the random Hawkins residents we've met over the seasons. People from the town, classmates, neighbours. When the Upside Down fully invades, loads of them are going to die. We might see characters we recognise from earlier seasons just gone, killed by demogorgons or the environment itself. That would make the stakes feel real in a way that named character deaths sometimes don't. Showing the collateral damage, the ordinary people who suffer because of the extraordinary situation. The supporting cast is basically there to raise the stakes and show that anyone can die. And honestly, that's what makes the show so tense. If they're willing to kill beloved side characters, the main cast isn't safe either. Every death adds weight to the danger, makes us believe that our favourites might actually not survive. But let's talk about the actual endgame scenarios for Hawkins itself, because even if characters survive, the town might not. Since we're on the topic of the town itself, it's time to discuss what actually happens to Hawkins by the end of season 5. And honestly, none of the options are good. There are basically 3 or 4 ways this could go, and each one is progressively more depressing. Let's start with the least destructive option, which is still pretty terrible. Scenario 1 is that Hawkins gets saved but remains uninhabitable. The gates get closed somehow. The Upside Down gets pushed back, but the damage is too severe to reverse. The town is structurally unsound, contaminated with upside-down particles, maybe still has lingering creatures hiding in the ruins. The government declares it a quarantine zone. Everyone evacuates permanently. Hawkins ceases to be a functional town and becomes one of those places on the map that people avoid, like Chernobyl or other disaster sites. The characters save the world, but their home is gone forever. That's a bittersweet ending at best. Scenario 2 is that Hawkins gets completely destroyed and consumed. The Upside Down wins in that location. The entire town is absorbed into the alternate dimension, becoming a permanent part of that hellscape. Maybe there's a barrier or wall erected around where Hawkins used to be, keeping the Upside Down contained but not eliminated. It's like the gates closed, not by pushing the Upside Down back, but by accepting that this chunk of reality is lost. The characters save the rest of the world, but lose their town completely. It just doesn't exist anymore, except as part of the Upside Down. Scenario 3, and this is where it gets really complicated, is some kind of timeline reset or reality rewrite. The show has flirted with time elements before. The frozen Upside Down, the way gates work, Vecna's ability to manipulate perception and memory. What if the solution to stopping the invasion is to literally reset time to before any of this started? Before 11 opened the first gate, before Will got taken, before Vecna got banished to the Upside Down. Everything just gets undone. Reality snaps back to the way it should have been. The characters might not even remember what happened. They'd just be living normal lives in a normal Hawkins, and all the trauma and loss would be erased along with the threat. But would that be satisfying? I don't think the Duffer Brothers would do a full reset, because it would undermine everything the characters went through. All their growth, all their choices, all their sacrifices would be meaningless if reality just resets and none of it happened. It would feel like a cop-out. Scenario 4 is that the Upside Down gets contained, but the gates remain permanent. They're managed somehow, guarded by the military or some new division of the government. Hawkins becomes this weird hybrid zone where the barriers between dimensions are thinner, where supernatural stuff happens regularly, where the characters have to live. Knowing the Upside Down is always just barely kept at bay. It's not a happy ending, it's just survival. The threat isn't gone, it's just managed. And that means the danger is ongoing, forever. What's really interesting is the government cover-up angle. For 4 seasons, the government has been lying about what's happening in Hawkins. It's been labs and experiments and classified operations. But season 4 ended with the town literally split open, glowing red particles falling from the sky, and news crews covering the disaster. There's no way to hide that. The whole world is watching. So either the government comes up with the most absurd cover story ever, something about seismic activity and volcanic gas or whatever, or they finally have to admit that something unexplainable is happening. And if they admit it, what does that mean for the characters? Do our kids become famous for saving the world? Do they get taken by government scientists for study because of their connection to the Upside Down? Do they spend the rest of their lives in interviews and hearings explaining what happened? None of that sounds good. Imagine being a Hawkins resident who doesn't know about the Upside Down, and you're being told to evacuate permanently. You're losing your home, your business, your entire life, and no one is giving you a real explanation. Just vague statements about safety hazards and contamination zones. You'd be furious, and multiply that by thousands of people, all displaced, all traumatized, all demanding answers that the government can't or won't provide. That's a humanitarian crisis on top of the supernatural crisis. I think the most likely scenario is that Hawkins gets saved but becomes a ghost town. The gates close, the immediate danger passes, but the damage is too severe for life to return to normal. The characters save the world, but their home is gone. They have to rebuild somewhere else, start over, carry the memories of what's happened without being able to return to the place where it all began. That's properly sad but feels realistic for this type of story. Regardless of which scenario plays out, Hawkins, as we knew it, is gone. The question is whether it becomes a ghost town, a quarantine zone, or literally ceases to exist. None of those options are happy endings for a show that started with kids riding bikes around a normal Indiana town. Now let's talk about the actual final confrontation with Vecna and how that battle might go down. Now, even though we've talked about character fates and town scenarios, we haven't really dug into how the actual final battle plays out. And there are some really interesting theories about this. The first thing to understand is that the final confrontation has to be bigger than anything we've seen before. Season 1 had 11 fighting the Demogorgon in the school. Season 2 had the Mind Flayer's possession and the gate closing at the lab. Season 3 had the Battle of Starcourt Mall with the Russian machine. Season 4 had multiple battles across multiple locations with Vecna. So Season 5 has to top all of that. We're talking multiple fronts, multiple groups, probably spanning between dimensions. The pattern Stranger Things has always used is that everyone contributes using their specific skills. The kids with superpowers handle the supernatural side. The kids with intelligence handle the planning and tech. The adults handle the muscle and distraction. So the final plan probably involves all of those elements coordinated simultaneously. 11 fights Vecna psychically, while someone else attacks him physically in the Upside Down, while a third group closes the gates from the real world. Something that requires perfect timing and every single person playing their role correctly. What's really cool about this theory is that it gives everyone a moment to shine before the end. Mike gets to be the leader coordinating everyone. Dustin handles the technical equipment. Lucas and Erica use their knowledge of Hawkins' layout. Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Jonathan are the strike team going into the Upside Down. Hopper leads the military side. Joyce protects the kids. Will uses his connection to sense where Vecna is and what he's planning. And 11 faces Vecna directly in the mental plane. Everyone matters. But here's the thing. That kind of coordinated plan has loads of opportunities for things to go wrong. Communications fail. Equipment breaks. Someone gets separated. The timing gets off. And in those moments of failure, that's where the deaths happen. The heroic sacrifices. The people staying behind to fix something or hold off monsters. The plan might ultimately work, but the cost would be devastating. There's also the question of whether Vecna can actually be killed or just contained. We saw in Season 4 that 11 couldn't destroy him, even at her full power. She could fight him, hurt him, push him back, but not eliminate him. And Nancy, shooting him and lighting him on fire, didn't work either. He just fell out the window and crawled away. So how do you kill something that can survive all of that? One theory is that you don't kill Vecna. You trap him, lock him in the Upside Down permanently, and then seal all the gates so he can never escape. He'd be alive, but isolated, cut off from our world forever. That would be a victory, but not a satisfying one. Knowing that monster is still out there, still conscious, still hating you, just trapped. That's horror movie sequel bait, honestly. Another theory is that Vecna can only be killed by someone with similar powers. 11 or another psychic. A mental death rather than a physical one. Maybe the final battle is entirely in the psychic plane, with 11 and Vecna fighting in a space made of memories and consciousness. And maybe 11 wins by accepting that she has to give up her own life, or powers to destroy him. A mutual destruction scenario where both of them cease to exist. There's also the Mind Flayer wildcard. We still don't know if Vecna controls the Mind Flayer completely, or if they're separate entities working together. If they're separate, killing Vecna might not stop the Mind Flayer. Our heroes might defeat Vecna and think they've won, only to realise the real threat is still out there. That would be absolutely devastating. All that sacrifice for nothing because they killed the wrong enemy. The music element from Season 4 will probably come back. Max was saved from Vecna by her friends playing her favourite song, Running Up That Hill. The music pulled her out of the trance and weakened Vecna's hold on her. So maybe music or emotion is the key to fighting him. Maybe the final battle involves the entire group creating some kind of emotional or sensory overload that breaks his concentration. Everyone sharing memories and feelings and love, overwhelming him with the human connections he hates so much. It's a bit cheesy, but Stranger Things has never been subtle about the power of friendship and love being the ultimate weapon. What's interesting about Vecna is that he's not just evil for evil's sake. He has reasons for what he's doing, even if they're twisted. He genuinely believes humanity is flawed and needs to be remade. He sees himself as a revolutionary, not a villain. So there might be an attempt to reach him, to show him he's wrong, to offer redemption. And that attempt might fail spectacularly, because Vecna is too far gone to be saved. But the characters would try anyway, because that's who they are. I think the final battle will involve time loops or timeline manipulation somehow. The Frozen Upside Down has been building toward that. Maybe the key is to break the loop, to release the Upside Down from being stuck on November 6th, 1983, and let time flow normally again. And doing that might require going back to that moment somehow, either physically or mentally, and changing what happened. 11 might have to relive the moment she opened the first gate and make a different choice. That would be time travel without being a full reset, changing one specific moment to prevent everything that followed. The really tragic element is that no matter how the battle goes, it's going to require sacrifice. The Duffer Brothers have been clear that this ending is earned, not easy. So even if the heroes win, even if Hawkins is saved, loads of people won't survive to see it. The victory will be hollow because of who he lost getting there. But talking a bit more about Vecna specifically, and what his ultimate plan actually is, because I don't think we've seen the full picture yet. Let's talk about Vecna himself, for a bit, because his motivations are actually really interesting when you break them down. Henry Creel wasn't born a monster. He was born with powers he didn't understand and couldn't control. He could see into people's minds, see their darkest thoughts and worst impulses, and apparently what he saw convinced him that humanity was fundamentally broken. People were fake, putting on masks to hide their true selfish natures. Society was built on lies and structures that enforced conformity. And young Henry, probably around 10 or 11 years old, decided that this couldn't continue, that the world needed to be unmade and rebuilt properly. So he started killing, his own family first, his mother and sister, trapped in nightmares and mental torture until they died. His father survived but was blamed for the murders and institutionalized. Henry was just a kid playing normal until Dr. Brenner found him and brought him to Hawkins' lab. And there, instead of helping him, Brenner studied him, turned him into Subject 1, tried to recreate his powers in other children. Henry was a prisoner for years until he manipulated 11 into removing the device suppressing his powers. And then he tried to kill everyone in the lab and force 11 to join him in remaking the world. But 11, a literal child, defeated him. She pushed him into the Upside Down and left him there. And that moment in 1979 is when Vecna truly came into being. Henry Creel died, and Vecna was born in the Upside Down, transformed by that dimension's energy into something not entirely human anymore. His body twisted, his skin became corpse-like, and he gained even more power. And he discovered the hive mind particles floating in the Upside Down, the proto-mind flayer, and he shaped them into the entity we know, gave them form and purpose. The mind flayer became his tool for enacting his vision. What's really fascinating about Vecna is that he believes he's right. He's not doing this because he's crazy or evil in a traditional sense. He genuinely thinks that destroying the current world and remaking it without human weakness is the correct thing to do. He sees himself as a revolutionary, someone willing to do what's necessary to achieve a better reality. That makes him way more dangerous than a simple monster. You can't reason with conviction that strong. The name Vecna is something a lot of people don't fully understand. In Dungeons and Dragons, Vecna is a legendary lich, a wizard who achieved immortality through dark magic and became godlike. He's known for his secret knowledge and his desire to control reality itself. The Hellfire Club, Eddie's D&D group, was running a campaign that featured Vecna as the villain right when the real Vecna was enacting his plan in Season 4. That parallel wasn't accidental. Dustin and the others have been using D&D to understand and predict supernatural threats since Season 1. The game has always been a map for the actual danger, so Henry Creel choosing the name Vecna for himself means he sees himself as that type of entity. A being with secret knowledge, the power to reshape reality, and the willingness to destroy anything that stands in his way. It's not just a nickname, it's a statement of purpose. The Mind Flayer connection is still a bit unclear, which is honestly one of the biggest mysteries going into Season 5. Vecna created the Mind Flayer's current form by shaping the particles in the Upside Down. But were those particles already conscious? Was there already some kind of entity there that Vecna just gave shape to? Or did Vecna literally create a second consciousness out of nothing? Because if the Mind Flayer is just an extension of Vecna, killing Vecna should stop everything. But if the Mind Flayer is its own entity that Vecna shaped but doesn't fully control, that's a different problem entirely. Maybe Vecna thinks he's in control, but the Mind Flayer is using him just as much as he's using it. Maybe they're in a symbiotic relationship where neither one is fully dominant. And maybe in Season 5, we'll see that relationship break down, with the Mind Flayer turning on Vecna or revealing it has its own agenda. Fun fact about the 4 gates specifically. In occult symbolism, 4 points creating a cross or intersection is often used for summoning or binding rituals. The 4 gates meeting in the center of Hawkins creates a symbol, a pattern, and patterns have power in magical thinking. Vecna needed specifically 4 kills, not 3 or 5, because 4 creates that pattern. It's ritualistic. He's not just opening doors, he's enacting a spell, a working using death as the energy source and geometry as the structure. What happens after the dimensions merge is the real question. Is Vecna trying to make the Upside Down consume our entire world? Replace our reality with his, or is he trying to blend them, create some kind of hybrid reality where he can remake the rules? His speech to 11 in Season 4 talks about how they should work together to create a better world free from the lies and constraints of human society. So he has a vision for what comes after. It's not just destruction, it's reconstruction according to his ideals. But what are his ideals exactly? What does Vecna's perfect world look like? We know he hates conformity and societal structures. He thinks humans are weak and fake. So maybe his vision is a world without society at all, where power and truth are all that matter. A sort of anarchist nightmare, where only the strong survive and everyone's worst impulses are laid bare. That would be hell, honestly. A reality built on cruelty and dominance, with no empathy or connection. The personal connection to 11 as a sort of sister is tragic in its own way. They're both products of Brenner's experiments, both victims who became powerful, but where 11 found love and connection and chose to protect people, Henry found hatred and isolation and chose to destroy. They're mirrors of each other, different responses to similar trauma, and I think that's why Vecna wants 11 on his side so badly. She's the only person who could truly understand him, the only one who's been through what he's been through. But she chose differently, and he can't forgive that. To be honest, I don't think Vecna can be redeemed. He's too far gone, too committed to his vision. He's had decades in the Upside Down to solidify his beliefs and eliminate any remaining humanity. Trying to reach him with emotional appeals or showing him he's wrong, that probably won't work. He'll see it as weakness. The only way to stop him is through force, through matching his power and destroying him entirely, and that's going to cost everything. Vecna isn't just a monster. He's a deeply traumatized person who decided that breaking reality was the solution to his pain, and that makes him way more dangerous than the Mind Flayer or any Demogorgon because you can't negotiate with someone who wants to remake existence itself. Now let's get into the really heartbreaking stuff. The specific sacrifices and deaths that we're absolutely not emotionally prepared for. And here are the moments that are probably going to wreck us emotionally. I'm not going to lie, writing this section was properly depressing. The last stand sacrifice is something almost every big finale includes. One person stays behind to hold off the enemy while everyone else escapes or completes the mission. They know they're not going to survive, but they do it anyway, because that's what heroes do. In Stranger Things, this could be Hopper, the dad who's already died once protecting his daughter figure. Or it could be Steve, the babysitter who spent 4 seasons learning that protecting others is his purpose. Or honestly, it could be anyone. The moment where they look at their friends, say something meaningful, and then turn back toward the danger. That's going to destroy viewers regardless of who it is. And the really brutal part is that we'll probably see their death, not just implied off screen but actually shown. Them fighting, struggling, maybe getting overwhelmed by Demogorgons or Vines or Vecna himself. The show won't give us a clean fade to black. We'll have to watch it happen. That's peak emotional devastation. Parent dying to save child is another classic. We've already had Bob die saving Joyce and the kids. Billy died protecting Eleven and Max. So season 5 might give us Joyce dying for Will or Jonathan, or Hopper dying for Eleven. The parent's sacrifice that completes their arc of redemption or protection. And the kids having to live with knowing their parent gave their life for them. That's lifelong trauma. Survivor's guilt and grief mixed together. Imagine the last conversation. The parent telling their child they're proud of them, that they love them, that everything will be okay, and the child realizing what's about to happen and begging them not to do it. But the parent does it anyway, because that's what parents do. They'd rather die than see their child hurt. That scene, whenever it happens with whoever it involves, is going to have everyone crying. The friend group being permanently split is something that feels inevitable. These kids have been through everything together since they were 12, but they're older now, nearly adults, and adults don't stay in the same friend groups forever, especially after trauma. Even if they all survive physically, the bonds between them might break. They might not be able to look at each other without remembering what they lost. The group might scatter, everyone moving away to different cities, trying to outrun the memories. And that's tragic in a different way. Not death, but distance. The slow death of friendship under the weight of shared trauma. Or maybe the split is more immediate. Maybe one of them does something unforgivable during the battle. Makes a choice that saves lives but costs someone else theirs. And the group can't forgive that. They can't move past it. So even though they won, even though Hawkins is saved, they lose each other. That would be devastating. Romantic relationships ended by death is obvious but effective. Mike and Eleven finally get their happy ending, and then one of them dies. Nancy and Steve, or Nancy and Jonathan. Same thing. Lucas and Max, though that relationship is already basically dead with her in the coma. The show has been building these relationships for 4 seasons, making us invest in them, and then it's going to rip them apart. Young love cut short by tragedy is a classic for a reason. It hurts, and the really cruel version is that the death happens right after a big romantic moment. A confession, or kiss, or promise of a future together. The I love you followed immediately by death. That's manipulation of the audience's emotions, but it works. We get the payoff we wanted, and then it's immediately taken away. And that double punch of emotion is brutal. The Eddie situation happening again, but worse, refers to a beloved character dying heroically, but their death being misunderstood or vilified by the public. Eddie died a hero, helping to save Hawkins, but the town thinks he's a murderer who died running from justice. His name is ruined. And imagine if that happens to another character in season 5. Someone dies saving everyone, but is blamed for the disaster by people who don't understand what actually happened. Their family has to live with knowing their loved one was a hero, but having the entire world think otherwise. That's a special kind of tragedy. And here's something no one wants to think about, but is probably going to happen. Pet deaths. Tews the cat made it through season 2 somehow. The buyers had a dog that died off screen before the series. Animals die in horror shows to show the stakes without killing human characters. If there are pets in season 5, they're probably not going to survive. And yes, that's going to make people cry just as much as human deaths. Sometimes more, honestly. Childhood innocence officially dead isn't about a specific person dying, but about the loss of something intangible. These characters started the series as kids playing D&D and riding bikes. They were innocent, but every season has stripped away more of that innocence, forced them to grow up too fast, exposed them to trauma that no child should experience. By the end of season 5, whatever remained of their childhood will be completely gone. They'll be adults shaped by horror and loss, and you can't get that innocence back. That's permanent death of a different kind. The final goodbye scenes we'll get are something I'm really not ready for. The moments where characters who are about to die get to say their last words to the people they love. Hopper telling Eleven he's proud of her. Joyce telling Will he's the strongest person she knows. Steve telling Dustin to look after the kids. Mike telling Eleven she made his life worth living. These scenes are designed to wreck us. The actors will be crying, the characters will be crying, and everyone watching will be crying. And knowing this show, they won't all get those moments. Some deaths will be sudden, without time for goodbyes. Someone will just be gone, and their friends will have to deal with all the things left unsaid. That's worse in some ways. The conversation that never happened. The apology or confession or reconciliation that never got a chance to occur. Which death will be the red wedding moment is hard to predict. The red wedding from Game of Thrones worked because it was shocking, unexpected, and killed multiple characters we loved all at once. Stranger Things could do something similar. Maybe there's a moment where everything seems to be going according to plan, and then suddenly, multiple people die in quick succession. Maybe the base or safe house gets attacked and overrun. Maybe the plan fails catastrophically, and several characters are just gone before anyone can react. That would break viewers, the emotional equivalent of being punched repeatedly. Post-credits scenes showing aftermath are something the show has never done, but might for the finale, showing what happens weeks or months or years after the final battle. Who's visiting graves, who moved away, who's still in Hawkins dealing with the ruins, who's trying to live normal lives but clearly haunted. Those aftermath scenes can be just as devastating as the deaths themselves because they show the long-term cost, the survivors trying to figure out how to keep living when so much has been taken from them. The Duffer Brothers have said the ending will be satisfying, but not necessarily happy. And based on everything we've discussed, satisfying probably means emotionally devastating, but earned. The deaths and losses will make sense for the story and characters. They won't be random or cheap, but that doesn't make them easier to watch. If anything, it makes them harder because we'll understand why they had to happen, even as we're wishing they hadn't. Since we're talking about reality-breaking stuff, let's quickly touch on the timeline and reality theories that might change everything we think we know. Now, there's been loads of theories about time travel, alternate timelines, and whether the show might pull a reset button. And whilst I don't think they'll do a full reset, there are some really interesting possibilities. The biggest theory is the time loop idea, that everything that's happened has happened before, that the characters are stuck in a cycle, reliving the same events over and over, and the only way to break free is to recognize the loop and change something crucial. This theory comes from the frozen upside down, being stuck on November 6th, 1983. Why that specific date? What's so important about the day Will vanished? Maybe it's not just frozen. Maybe it's the anchor point of a loop. The moment everything began, and the moment everything has to return to in order for the cycle to complete. If that's true, then everything we've watched might have happened multiple times already, in different iterations. Different versions of Eleven and Will and Mike and the others, fighting Vecna, dying, failing, and then the loop resets, and they try again, without remembering the previous attempts. That would be absolutely mental. It would mean that all the deaths and losses are permanent only until the loop resets, but also that the characters are trapped in this cycle of tragedy forever until they figure out how to break it. But honestly, that theory feels too complicated for Stranger Things. The show has always been pretty straightforward with its plot. Even the Upside Down, for all its weirdness, follows consistent rules. Adding time loops would muddy that. So I don't think we're getting full-on time travel or loop mechanics. Maybe hints of it, maybe some manipulation of time as part of the final solution, but not a complete timeline rewrite. The multiple timelines theory is similar, but different. It suggests that every time someone makes a major choice, reality splits into alternate versions. So there's a timeline where Will died in Season 1, a timeline where 11 never opened the gate, a timeline where Vecna won completely, and maybe in Season 5 we'll see some of these alternate realities. Maybe Vecna's plan involves merging all the timelines into one, creating some kind of reality where all possibilities exist simultaneously. That would be nightmare fuel, having to fight versions of yourself from timelines where you made different choices. But again, I don't think the Duffers will go that route. Multiple timelines require too much explanation and take focus away from the emotional core of the story. They're more likely to stick with the single, linear timeline we've been following, even if that timeline gets manipulated or changed. The memory preservation versus reality change idea is interesting, though. What if the solution involves changing the past, but everyone retains their memories of the original timeline? So they stop Vecna by preventing something crucial from happening years ago, but they remember everything that happened in the timeline where he succeeded. They'd be living in a world that's safe, but they'd carry the trauma of the world that wasn't. That's a different kind of tragedy. Victory at the cost of being forever haunted by what might have been. Fun fact about the Montauk Project, which was the original inspiration for Stranger Things. The Montauk Project was an alleged government conspiracy involving experiments with time travel, psychological warfare, and contact with alternate dimensions. It supposedly took place at Camp Hero in Montauk, New York. The Duffer Brothers originally pitched Stranger Things as Montauk before changing the name and setting. But those original elements, the government experiments and dimensional rifts, they're still core to the show. So maybe Season 5 brings back some of that original Montauk concept, including time manipulation. Whether deaths can be undone is the question everyone wants answered. If there's time travel or reality rewriting, can we get back the people we've lost? Can Eddie come back? Can Bob? Can Billy? And the answer is probably no, even if time stuff happens. Because undoing deaths removes the weight of those losses. It makes everything that came after meaningless. The grief, the growth, the way those deaths shape the survivors, all of that disappears if you just hit undo. The Duffer Brothers know that. They know that one of the show's strengths is its willingness to have consequences. So even if they play with time or reality, I don't think they'll use it to resurrect people. Maybe they'll show us glimpses of what could have been, timelines where those people lived. But in our timeline, the main timeline, the deaths stay dead. And that's how it should be, narratively speaking, even though it hurts. The compromise endings are more likely. Not a full reset, not everyone alive and happy, but something in between. Maybe they stop Vecna and close the gates, but Hawkins is destroyed and several major characters are dead. Maybe they save the town, but lose 11 or Hopper or Will. Maybe they win, but the cost is so high that it doesn't feel like a victory. That's the kind of ending that feels earned. Bittersweet. Satisfying because the threat is stopped, but devastating because of what it took to stop it. To be honest, time travel would be a bit of a cop-out. The show has always been about facing consequences and living with loss, not undoing it. The characters don't get to reset and try again. They have to move forward with their grief and trauma. That's what makes the story powerful. If you could just undo the bad stuff, none of it would matter. the stakes would be fake. So I think any time elements in season 5 will be minor. Maybe understanding that the upside down is frozen helps them figure out Vecna's weakness. Maybe there's a way to unstick it, let it flow normally again, and that somehow disrupts his power. But not full-time travel, not reality resets, nothing that would let everyone survive and return to normal. The show has never been about normal. It's been about learning to live in a world that's permanently changed by trauma and horror, and the ending should reflect that. Time travel theories are fun to discuss, but they're probably red herrings. The show has always been about facing consequences and living with loss, not undoing it, which means any deaths we get are likely permanent, and that's terrifying. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's video. I know this was heavy, properly depressing, honestly. Spending an hour discussing all the ways our favourite characters might die is not exactly light entertainment. But Stranger Things Season 5 is going to be tragic. The Duffer Brothers have promised that. The setup from Season 4 demands it. The scale of the threat means massive sacrifice. And whilst we all want everyone to survive and get their happy ending, that's just not realistic for this type of story. In a future one, I'm definitely going to cover more Stranger Things theories, character analysis, and hopefully some happier predictions. Maybe a video on the best case scenarios, the ways characters could survive, the possible happy moments we might get before everything goes dark. Balance out all this tragedy with a bit of hope. But until next time, try not to think about the upside down before bed. Maybe put on some Kate Bush instead. Stay safe and sweet dreams. And